While my brother received a new Jeep for graduation, I was left with just a lottery ticket and broken promises. Graduation day was supposed to be a celebration, not just of academic success, but of the years of silent sacrifices, late nights, and the growing up we all had to do along the way. I still remember the excitement in the air that morning, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the sound of family members arriving in clusters, dressed up, proud, cameras ready. I had done everything right. Maintained a solid GPA, never got in trouble, and even held down a part-time job during senior year to ease the financial strain on my parents. But none of that mattered when I saw my younger brother pull into the driveway in a brand new Jeep, big red bow on top, engine purring like some trophy he'd effortlessly earned. My heart dropped for a second. I thought it might have been a shared family gift. But then I saw our dad pat him on the back and say, "You deserve this, son." And just like that, I realized it wasn't for both of us. It was for him. I tried to hold back the sting, tried to smile when everyone looked at me. When it was my turn, they handed me a small envelope. No big speech, no camera flash, just a generic, supermarket-bought card with a single lottery ticket tucked inside. "You never know," my mom said, almost jokingly. "Maybe you'll hit the jackpot." I chuckled softly, more out of discomfort than humor, and thanked them. But deep down, something in me shifted. It wasn't about the Jeep, not really. It was the symbolism, the clear difference in how we were valued. I'd spent so much time convincing myself we were all treated equally, that love in our family wasn't measured by gifts or grand gestures. But standing there, holding that flimsy ticket while my brother revved the engine of his brand new car, I felt something crack. I didn't want to make a scene, not on a day that was supposed to be joyful. So I tucked the ticket in my wallet, forced a smile for the family photo, and swallowed that hollow feeling. But it stayed with me, that invisible message that no one else seemed to notice. I began to wonder if they ever truly saw me, or if I was just a shadow in someone else's spotlight. The days that followed were oddly quiet, though my thoughts grew louder with every passing hour. My brother, still buzzing with excitement over his new Jeep, posted photos all over social media. Him behind the wheel, him next to it at sunset. Even a video of our dad tossing him the keys like it was some coming-of-age movie scene. I watched the likes roll in. The comments from friends and extended family saying things like, "Well deserved," and "Lucky guy." It wasn't jealousy that twisted in my stomach. It was something deeper. A feeling of invisibility. No one even asked what I got for graduation. Not one message. Not even a courtesy "congrats." It was as if I hadn't existed in that moment. I kept replaying the scene in my head, wondering if I had imagined the disappointment, if I was overthinking it. But each time I did, I landed on the same conclusion. I was overlooked, plain and simple. My parents went back to their routines, cheerful as ever, chatting about future trips and how proud they were of my brother. I started noticing little things I had ignored before. How he never had to do chores without being reminded. How my successes were met with, "That's great," while his were, "Amazing," or "You're incredible." I remembered the time I won a regional science fair and they said, "That's cool, but don't get too cocky." When he placed third in a local art contest, they hung the certificate on the fridge for weeks. I'd spent years telling myself that love isn't always loud, that maybe I was just the low-maintenance one, the one who didn't need the fanfare. But now I realized maybe they had just stopped seeing me. I was the reliable one, the quiet achiever, and somewhere along the line they started expecting I'd just be okay with that. I wasn't angry yet, not then, just tired of giving grace where none was given back. I kept my head down and got back to work. After all, I still had my part-time job at the bookstore, and I was saving for college dorm supplies. I figured maybe once I moved out, once they missed me, they'd see me differently. But that Jeep in the driveway, shining like a monument to favoritism, reminded me daily that maybe some things would never change. It wasn't until I overheard a conversation between my parents and my aunt that the weight of everything really hit me. They were in the kitchen, thinking I was upstairs, and I could hear the pride in their voices as they went on about my brother's bright future, and how he's always been the special one. My aunt asked something about me, how I was preparing for college, and there was this pause, just long enough to sting. Then my mom said, "Oh, you know him, he'll manage." He always does. That line, said with a chuckle and a sip of coffee, clung to me like smoke. He'll manage, as if my resilience made me less deserving of recognition. less in need of support. I didn't want to be dramatic, but how could I not feel replaced? I started replaying childhood memories, moments I hadn't thought about in years, like the time my brother scraped his knee and got ice cream and hugs while I sat silently on the couch with my sprained wrist, waiting for someone to notice, or the Christmas when he got the gaming console he'd wanted, and I got socks and a book I already owned. I used to laugh it off, used to tell myself love comes in different forms, but I was beginning to question if I'd just been making excuses for people who didn't want to put in the effort. That week, I stopped joining them for dinner. I'd reheat leftovers quietly, eat alone at the counter, and say I was studying or working extra shifts. No one pressed me, no one came to check. My brother was busy showing off his new Jeep to friends, revving the engine like it validated his worth. And my parents? They beamed every time he walked into a room. Meanwhile, I was folding laundry, making my own meals, juggling shifts at the bookstore, and planning my future on my own. It hurt, but it also started to sharpen me. The pain of being overlooked carved something fierce and determined in me. I didn't want their praise anymore. I wanted out. I wanted to build something where I didn't have to keep proving myself to people who didn't seem to care. And somewhere in that ache, I decided I would never make anyone feel the way they made me feel. Not if I could help it. College move-in day came sooner than I expected, and the night before I waited for anyone, to ask if I needed help packing. But the house was full of noise centered around my brother and his new road trip plans with friends. They were mapping out their route using my dad's laptop at the dining table, laughing like it was the most important moment in the world. I quietly zipped up my bags in the room I had grown up in, every corner holding silent memories and a soft sadness that only I seemed to feel. I wasn't expecting a grand send-off, but I had at least hoped for a family dinner or a heartfelt moment. Instead, I got a casual drive safe from my mom and a distracted nod from my dad. My brother didn't even look up from his phone. I carried my own bags to the car, packed them in the trunk, and stood there for a second, staring at the house. It looked the same, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The drive to campus was quiet. I had borrowed my friend Jake's old sedan, promising to return it by the end of the weekend. The car rattled a bit on the highway. The AC was barely working, and I could hear the sound of my own breath filling the silence. When I pulled into the dorm parking lot, I saw other students surrounded by family, parents unloading boxes, siblings snapping photos, people laughing. And then there was me, alone, sweaty, trying to carry a heavy box up the stairs with my backpack sliding off my shoulder. I set up my room quietly, choosing the bed near the window. I opened my wallet later that night, almost out of habit, and saw the lottery ticket still tucked in there, creased and half forgotten. I hadn't scratched it yet. It felt like a symbol now, of their version of effort, of what they thought I was worth. I considered tossing it out, but something in me said, keep it. Not because I believed it would change my life, but because it reminded me of why I needed to make my own way. That night, as I lay in bed in the unfamiliar room, I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt focused. I promised myself that I'd make something out of this quiet beginning. And if I ever looked back, it would only be to see how far I'd come. My first few months at college were tough, not because of the classes, I had always been disciplined, but because of the quiet loneliness that came from realizing no one back home really checked in. Some of my friends got care packages from their parents, others had weekly FaceTime calls or surprise visits. I got the occasional text, mostly reminders about bills or vague check-ins like, hope things are going well. The truth was, I had to become my own family out there. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at the library in the afternoons and another at a late-night diner downtown. Most students complained about their workload, but I didn't have that luxury. If I didn't work, I couldn't eat, couldn't afford textbooks, couldn't cover basic living expenses. Some nights, I'd collapse into bed after a double shift, my feet aching and my eyes burning, but I still made it to class the next day. I studied in between orders at the diner, scribbling notes on napkins, reviewing flashcards while wiping down tables. Professors started noticing. A few pulled me aside, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. I always smiled and said I was fine, even when I wasn't. I didn't want pity. I wanted respect. I wanted to prove to myself that I could rise without the safety net others took for granted. During winter break, I didn't go home. I told my parents I had picked up extra shifts, and I had, but deep down, I just didn't want to walk back into that house where I felt unseen. I watched through social media as my brother posted pictures from his ski trip, the family all bundled up and smiling. I wasn't even mentioned. Not a tag, not a caption, nothing. It stung, but it also motivated me. I used that time to refocus, to set goals, to figure out what kind of life I wanted to build. I kept the lottery ticket in a drawer beside my bed. Some nights I'd look at it, not as a symbol of luck, but as a reminder of what I didn't want. Empty gestures, surface-level support. I wanted substance, and I was going to create it, one exhausting day at a time. Spring semester brought some changes I hadn't expected. I landed a small scholarship from the university for academic performance, just enough to ease the pressure a little. It felt like a win, like someone had finally seen how hard I was working. I remember standing in line at the financial aid office, holding the approval letter with trembling hands, and feeling the swell of quiet pride, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the kind that stays with you and reminds you you're capable. I didn't call my parents to tell them. Part of me wanted to hear them say they were proud, that they knew I could do it. But I stopped myself. That chapter was closing. If I was going to celebrate, it would be with people who showed up for me. I texted Jake instead, the friend who'd lent me his car that day I moved into the dorm. He showed up that evening with cheap pizza and sodas, and we sat in the courtyard eating, laughing, and talking about how far we'd come. It was the most seen I had felt in a while. One evening in April, I got a message from my mom. Your brother's Jeep broke down. Your dad's thinking of trading it in. I stared at the screen, almost amused. I didn't reply. A few days later, she called and left a voicemail, asking if I could come home for a weekend. They missed me, she said. I didn't buy it. I knew it was probably because people had started asking where I was, or maybe the family dynamic felt a little emptier without someone to quietly take up the space in the background. I had changed too much to go back to that. My silence was no longer submission. It was self-respect. Around campus, I was becoming more involved, joining a student-led nonprofit, tutoring first years in math, and finding comfort in the life I was building. For once, I wasn't living in the shadow of someone else's expectations. I wasn't trying to earn love through performance. I was just being, and that was enough. That Jeep, that lottery ticket, they were just symbols now, faded reminders of a past I had outgrown. I wasn't bitter, I was becoming, and that difference meant everything. By the time summer rolled around, I had secured an internship with a local tech startup, a paid one which felt like striking gold. It wasn't glamorous, and the office was barely more than a converted warehouse, but the team treated me like I mattered. They asked for my input, trusted me with real tasks, and even took me out for lunch on my birthday. It was the first birthday in years where I didn't feel forgotten. My parents didn't call. My brother texted a lazy HBD, no emojis, no punctuation, and somehow even that felt more like an obligation than care. I didn't respond. I spent the day walking through the city, earbuds in, letting the sun warm my skin as I thought about how far I had come without them. One day during a team meeting, I was asked to present an idea I'd been working on, something I had developed late at night after shifts, something I wasn't even sure anyone would care about. But they did. The room went quiet as I spoke, not out of boredom, but attention. When I finished, my supervisor said, "That's sharp thinking. Let's see how we can implement that." I felt something inside me shift. This was what it meant to be seen, to be valued for what I brought to the table, not because of my last name or birth order or how loudly I demanded attention. That evening, walking home, I realized I hadn't thought about the Jeep or the lottery ticket in weeks. I didn't care about what I didn't get anymore. I cared about what I was creating. I was no longer chasing approval from people who were too distracted to recognize what I had inside me. Instead, I was finally giving that approval to myself. When my roommate asked what my plans were after the internship, I said, to keep building something that's mine. I said it simply, but the conviction in my voice surprised even me. I didn't know exactly what was ahead, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. I was just moving forward, deliberately, honestly, and without apology. And that, I realized, was more powerful than anything they could have handed me in a shiny box or wrapped with a bow. It was early fall when I finally went home for a short weekend, not because I missed them, but because I had a day off and needed to grab a few things from my old room. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, didn't want a big deal, but when I walked through the front door, I felt like a stranger in the house I'd grown up in. The air was heavy with old routines, the same smells, the same sounds, yet everything felt smaller. My brother wasn't home, off on another trip according to my dad. My mom greeted me like I was a distant relative, polite and surprised, as if unsure how to act around me now. I went straight to my room, noticing it had barely been touched, still full of the silence I had left behind. Over dinner, the conversation was shallow, mostly about my brother's latest escapade and how he might sell the Jeep to get a newer model. I smiled politely, chewing slowly, feeling like an observer rather than a participant. Then, out of nowhere, my dad turned to me and said, "You've been quiet lately. Everything all right?" I almost laughed. "Yeah, I've just been busy. Working, classes, you know." My mom nodded, adding, "We're proud of you." But it felt like she was reading from a script. I didn't respond. The next morning, while grabbing my old backpack, I found the lottery ticket still tucked in a book I had left behind. I stared at it, this silly little thing that had once made me feel so small. I scratched it for the first time, not out of hope, just to close the loop. Nothing. Of course. But I wasn't disappointed. That ticket had already given me what I needed, the realization that my worth would never be tied to how someone else saw me. I slipped it back into the book and placed it on the shelf before heading out. My parents asked when I'd visit again, and I told them I wasn't sure. On the drive back, windows down, music up, I felt light, not because things had magically changed, but because I had. I wasn't angry anymore. I had nothing to prove to anyone. I had faced the sting of being overlooked and come out stronger. They might never understand what that lottery ticket symbolized for me. But I did, and that was enough. A few months after that quiet visit home, something unexpected happened. My brother reached out. He messaged me out of the blue with, "Hey, heard you've been doing well. Want to catch up sometime?" At first I ignored it. After everything, I wasn't sure what he wanted. But a part of me, still clinging to that sliver of sibling hope, agreed to meet up for coffee. We sat across from each other in a busy little cafe downtown, and for the first few minutes, it was all surface talk. His job, his travel, the Jeep he'd finally sold to upgrade to something flashier. He looked the same but different somehow, older, more tired around the eyes. Then, with his coffee nearly gone, he leaned forward and said, "You know, I was kind of a jerk to you back then. I don't think I really saw how much you were carrying." It hit me harder than I expected. I didn't rush to forgive him, but I acknowledged it with a quiet, "Yeah, you were." He nodded like he understood. "I guess I didn't realize what that Jeep meant, or what that lottery ticket said to you. I thought it was funny, but now I get it. It wasn't." I stared at him, trying to read if this was real or just a guilt trip. But he looked sincere, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe he was trying to see me, not as the extra in his story, but as a person in my own right. I didn't say much else, just sipped my drink and let the silence hang. After we parted ways, I didn't feel healed, but I felt lighter. That conversation didn't undo the years of being overlooked, but it cracked open something I thought had closed forever. Maybe he wasn't the same person anymore. Maybe I wasn't either. I walked home through the crisp evening air, thinking how funny life was. How sometimes the people who once ignored your pain come back, changed, wanting to reconnect not out of guilt, but maybe because they've finally grown enough to look beyond themselves. I didn't know if we'd ever be close, but I knew this. I no longer needed their validation. That was the difference now. They could come or go, but I would keep moving forward. Looking back now, years later, I realize how much that lottery ticket really meant, not because it was ever about winning money, but because it symbolized the way I had been seen and valued by my family. While my brother got a flashy Jeep and all the praise that came with it, I was handed a small, almost dismissive gesture that said, "You're not worth more." But that small ticket sparked something in me, a fire to prove my own worth beyond anyone else's limited view. I worked harder, not for their approval, but to create a life that was fully mine, built on my own terms and efforts. I've come to understand that family isn't just about who buys you things or applauds your milestones. It's about who stands beside you when no one else does. I've made peace with their choices and learned to cherish the friendships and relationships that truly see me. My brother and I have a complicated history, but I don't carry bitterness anymore. I carry lessons. Those lessons have shaped my resilience and empathy, reminding me that validation must come from within. Today I'm proud of where I am, not because of what I was given, but because of what I built for myself. The Jeep and the lottery ticket are relics of a past that no longer defines me. I've moved on with grace, focusing on my own journey and the people who genuinely support me. Sometimes the hardest experiences teach us the greatest truths, that self-worth isn't handed out, it's earned, and that the loudest voices aren't always the ones worth listening to. I've finally found peace in my own story, knowing that I am enough, just as I am.